The late afternoon sun cast long shadows across the blacktop as Elon Musk pulled his midnight blue Tesla Model S into the Burger King drive-thru. The day had been relentless. Meetings about fuel efficiency ratios, late-stage Starlink negotiations, and a frustrating pitch from a defense contractor. His brain felt like a microwave on overheat. All he wanted was something hot, greasy, and forgettable. Something profoundly human. He lowered his window just as the digital drive-thru screen flickered wildly before freezing entirely. Sorry about that," came a woman's voice through the crackling speaker. "We've been having firmware issues. Let me just force a patch and reboot the local node." Elon's brow twitched. He leaned closer. "Did you just say firmware, patch, and local node at a Burger King?" There was a pause. Then the speaker clicked on again, this time with a sigh. "Yeah, give me 5 seconds. You're lucky I didn't say Colonel Panic." A faint mechanical beep followed. The screen blinked, then came back to life, its pixel grid realigning with startling precision. Elon blinked, recognizing the diagnostic sequence from an embedded OS he'd once seen in a prototype engine panel. That wasn't Burger King's standard issue. Not by a mile. Moments later, he pulled forward to the payment window. There she stood, tired eyes, hair pulled into a lopsided bun, streaks of flour on her cheek and elbow. Her name tag read Regina, though the ink was starting to smudge. She looked up and froze. Elon stared back, almost stunned. "Regina Kudrow?" he asked slowly. She stiffened, eyes darting around as if she'd just been caught in some kind of quiet crime. "Elon," she murmured, "of all the drive-thrus in California." "What the hell are you doing here?" he asked, the question not accusatory, but truly baffled. Regina glanced behind her. "Not the place," she whispered. "Not the time." Even in a polo shirt smeared with ketchup and standing beside a soda fountain that leaked from the base, Regina Kudrow radiated the same quiet brilliance he remembered. She had once worked in SpaceX's thermal regulation division, developing modular heat shielding that had saved the company millions. She was one of the few engineers who could both conceptualize and code. 6 months ago, she had vanished from the company's orbit. Elon hadn't questioned it then. People came and went. Burnout, poaching, personal choice. But this? Burgers and fries? He opened his Tesla app, flicked a messenger, and texted his assistant 3 words. "Find Kudrow termination." While waiting for his meal, he hardly cared what it was anymore. He watched her move. Another machine beeped an error. Regina didn't flinch. She reached beneath the counter, recalibrated a sensor, using what looked suspiciously like a thermal probe turned into a burger spatula, and reprogrammed the touchscreen menu with the fluidity of someone correcting an orbital trajectory. When she handed him the bag, their eyes met again. This time, hers were defensive, braced for judgment. "You hungry?" Elon asked, not looking away. She frowned. "My shift ends in 45 minutes. I'll wait." He parked near the back of the lot, under the shade of a jacaranda tree, watching patrons come and go. A man with a tray of milkshakes. A teenager on a bike. But his mind wasn't on any of them. It was 6 months ago, back in the lab, when Regina had calmly pointed out a flaw in the propulsion code that could have caused a $3 billion loss. She hadn't just saved money. She saved time, lives, momentum. Why had she disappeared? When Regina finally emerged, still wearing her stained uniform and clutching a battered canvas bag, she looked hesitant. "I can't be gone too long," she said, sliding into the passenger seat. "I have a kid. My neighbor's watching him, but she has evening shifts too." "I'll get you home," Elon assured her. "Just tell me what happened." But Regina said nothing at first. She looked out the window, quiet, almost vibrating with fatigue. Her fingers clutched the fabric of her apron. Elon didn't push. He just drove, letting the silence stretch between them like a bridge neither of them was ready to cross. It wasn't awkward. It was respectful, patient. They passed strip malls and school zones. Regina finally spoke as they entered a residential neighborhood dotted with modest townhomes. "This is me," she said. He parked. "Come up. Just for 5 minutes." I owe you at least that." As they stepped inside, the scent of antiseptic and something warm, rice or lentils, hung in the air. A neighbor, an older woman named Mrs. Gueller, gave Elon a curious glance as she slipped past them. "He's in the bedroom coloring," Regina said. "Who?" Elon asked. "My son, Joe." She led him down a narrow hallway to a tiny room painted with planets and stars. There, a small boy with bright eyes and a knit cap looked up. "Elon Musk," he said wide-eyed. "You're the space rocket man. You're in Mom's folder." Elon smiled. "Guilty." Joe beamed. In that moment, something inside Elon shifted. This wasn't just about a promising employee. It was about a mother, a child, a mystery that needed unraveling not with spreadsheets or lawyers, but with care. As they sat in the living room, and Regina began to speak, really speak, it was clear this story was far from over. If you've come this far into the story, it probably means something clicked. Maybe you've seen someone dismissed unfairly, or maybe you felt that way yourself. Either way, if this moment stirred something in you, tap that like button. Let's show the world these stories matter. And hey, if you want to see where this goes next, consider subscribing. Not because it's what everyone says to do, but because this story isn't just fiction. It's a quiet rebellion in defense of second chances. The sun had dipped low behind the city skyline by the time Elon parked his car in front of a modest apartment complex. The kind of building with walls that carried the echoes of tired dreams and Tuesday night sitcoms. Regina sat in the passenger seat, her uniform rumpled and stained, her shoulders tense. She had insisted on taking the bus, but Elon wouldn't hear of it. Something about her voice at the drive-thru had pulled at something quiet and old in him, like a memory of when things were simpler or harder, or both. The walk to the door was silent. She fumbled with the keys, avoiding his eyes. The inside of the apartment was humble but clean, sparse furniture, a soft scent of lavender cleaning spray, and on the dining table, an open spiral notebook filled with technical diagrams. "You still work on these?" Elon asked gently, gesturing to the rocket sketches. Regina nodded, pressing her lips together. "When I have time. Joe loves to draw beside me. He says we're building space things together." Elon tilted his head. "Joe." "My son," she said softly. "He's 7. He's been sick." Before he could ask more, a voice from the bedroom called out, weak but cheerful. "Mama, is it bedtime yet?" Regina excused herself and returned moments later with a boy in flannel pajamas, clutching a small plush rocket. His head was bald from chemotherapy, his skin pale, but his eyes held a light that no illness had dimmed. "Elon," Regina said with a fragile smile, "this is Joe." Joe looked up wide-eyed. "You're the space rocket man from Mama's folder." Elon crouched down to Joe's level. "I guess that's me." Joe beamed, then sneezed into his sleeve. "Sorry," Regina said, gently guiding him back to bed. "His immunity's low." When she returned, her face had changed. Something about her expression was less guarded now, more resigned. She poured 2 cups of tea and sat at the small dining table. Elon didn't rush her. "I didn't think you'd remember me," she began. 6 months ago, I was in the clean room. We were testing composite stress loads for the S-21 booster redesign. It wasn't matching the simulations. My supervisor, Creed Bratton, said to tweak the numbers to make the results look cleaner than they were. He said it was standard, that no one would question it. She took a sip of tea, staring into the cup like it held the truth. I couldn't do it, so I stayed the whole weekend. Ran new simulations, built a new composite model. My data showed something completely different, something better. But by Monday morning, my report had been replaced. My badge didn't work. HR said my contract had been terminated for protocol breach. No one would tell me more. Elon didn't speak. He simply reached into his coat and pulled out a folded printout, her original report. She gasped. "You kept it?" "I had it retrieved this afternoon," he said. "I compared it to what's in the system now. Yours was deleted. Creed's report was uploaded 5 hours after your termination." There are even traces of metadata edits. Regina's fingers trembled. I lost everything, Elon. My job, my health plan. My husband left 2 weeks later. Couldn't handle the weight of Joe's diagnosis. I needed work fast. Burger King paid enough for rent and flexible hours for doctor visits. No one else would hire me, who wants an engineer fired from SpaceX. You were framed, Elon said simply. Regina nodded. But who would believe that? Ido. She blinked. Why? He held up her report. Because this is good. And because I've seen people crumble under pressure. But I've also seen people like you, people who stand up even when no one's watching. Tears formed in her eyes, but she didn't let them fall. I didn't think anyone noticed. They didn't, he said, but they will now. Outside, the sky had darkened fully. The apartment glowed faintly from the warm kitchen light, casting long shadows over the rocket designs. Joe was asleep, the plush rocket still clutched in his arms. Elon looked at the drawings again. One caught his attention. A triple thrust cooling loop built from a spiral heat exchange core. It was elegant, efficient, familiar. You drew this here, he asked, eyes scanning the curves and calculations. Last week, she said, on my break. He leaned back in his chair and smiled. You realize this design solves our superheat load distribution problem on the Falcon X prototype. Regina's mouth opened slightly. Wait, really? Yes. And I want to hear more. Tomorrow night. Dinner. Somewhere better than a drive-thru. She shook her head in disbelief. Are you serious? He stood. Very. At the door, she asked, why are you doing this? He paused. Because someone like you doesn't belong behind a cash register. And because maybe, just maybe, this second chance isn't just for you. It was past midnight when Elon Musk entered the video conference room on the 27th floor of Tesla HQ. The lights dimmed to a soft amber glow. The city of Austin glittered behind him through the tall windows, but his attention was fixed on the screen ahead. Creed Bratton's face appeared, pixelated but recognizable. He wore a forced smile, his office too pristine, too carefully curated. Elon, Creed said, feigning warmth. Didn't expect to hear from you this late. Elon didn't return the smile. Cut the formality. We need to talk. Creed blinked. Of course. About what exactly? Elon leaned forward. About Regina Kudrow. About the report you erased. About the fraud you covered up. A silence filled the digital void. Creed adjusted his tie. I'm not sure what you've been told. I've read the original report, Elon interrupted, voice low and steady. I've seen the timestamps, the system logs, the HR trail. You not only ignored her work, you erased it, then terminated her without due process. Creed stiffened. That report was incomplete. Risky. That report, Elon snapped, solves a heat dispersion flaw we've been chasing for 6 months. You buried it to protect your own reputation. For a second, Creed didn't speak. His eyes darted off-screen, likely scanning for legal phrases to deploy. I acted in the company's best interests. No, Elon said. You acted in your own. Another pause. Then Elon continued. Here's what's going to happen. You'll submit your resignation effective immediately. You'll issue no press statement. You'll receive a standard exit package, no bonuses. You're forcing me out. I'm giving you the chance to leave with a shred of dignity. I have more than enough evidence to make this public. Creed opened his mouth, but the words never came. He simply nodded. A quiet man already calculating the damage control. Elon ended the call. He remained seated, staring at the empty screen. His face, illuminated by the blue glow, showed no satisfaction, only resolve. He wasn't done yet. The following morning, the SpaceX legal team sat across from him in the boardroom, files and folders stacked like battlements. They looked tired, confused, and slightly alarmed. Mr. Musk, began the lead counsel, a woman named Talia Ng, we understand your intentions, but rehiring a previously terminated employee comes with complications. If Ms. Kudrow sues, we're vulnerable. If she's reinstated, it sets a precedent. Elon flipped open a folder in front of him. Regina Kudrow was wrongfully terminated. She's not being reinstated. I'm creating a new position for her. Talia raised an eyebrow. A new position. Senior Design Engineer, Systems Integrity Division. The division didn't exist until last night. It does now. Another lawyer spoke. But budget. I'll personally fund the first year of her salary and benefits if needed. Talia sat back. You're serious? I'm not playing chess, Elon replied. I'm fixing something that was broken. She'll have full health coverage, platinum tier, and the benefits extend to her son. No debate. The room fell silent. Do you even know if she'll accept? Someone muttered. She'll be offered the choice, Elon said, and she deserves to be asked properly. That afternoon, Regina sat on the worn couch in her apartment, a blanket draped over her lap, watching Joe nap beside her. The knock at the door was soft but urgent. When she opened it, Elon stood holding a folder and a reusable grocery bag filled with oranges and ginger tea. You didn't have to, she started. He raised a hand. It's not much. Joe mentioned he liked citrus. She smiled faintly and let him in. They sat at the same dining table where they'd first spoken, papers spread between them. I had a conversation with Creed, Elon began. He's out. Her eyes widened. You confronted him? Yes. And I spoke to legal. We've created a new division, Systems Integrity. I want you to head it. Senior Design Engineer. Full salary. Full benefits. Joe included. Regina was silent for a long moment. Elon, this is incredible, but I'm scared. Of what? That this could be taken again. That it's too good to be true. He leaned forward, voice softer now. It's not charity. It's recognition. Your work saved lives, Regina. And I let the wrong people silence that. I won't let it happen again. Her fingers traced the edge of the offer letter. Joe's treatments, they're expensive. I've been selling things quietly. Jewelry, books, even some of my engineering manuals. You won't need to anymore, he said simply. She looked up at him, eyes shining. I don't know how to thank you, she whispered. Just take the job, he said with a gentle grin. She laughed, the sound catching in her throat. Okay, yes, I'll take it. He smiled and stood. Good, we start fresh. Monday, but today go be with Joe. As he reached the door, she stopped him. Elon. He turned. Why me? Because, he said, you told the truth when it cost you everything. And because sometimes the right person is the one who never thought they'd get a second chance. He left, and she stood in the doorway long after the elevator chime closed, a folder in one hand and a future returning in the other. The elevator doors opened with a hushed chime, and Regina Kudrow stepped into the vast, glass-encased lobby of SpaceX's Hawthorne facility. It had been almost 7 months since she last walked these halls, but everything looked eerily the same. Polished white floors, soaring ceilings, and that faint smell of ozone and machine oil that used to mean purpose. Now, it only made her stomach tighten. Her new badge clicked softly as she passed through security. No one smiled. A few engineers gave her curt nods, while others turned away or stared too long. She had expected a quiet return, maybe even indifference. But this cold tension? That stung. Her workstation was in Bay 3, nestled between propulsion simulations and thermal systems. It had been cleared for her, but not kindly, she could tell. Someone had scribbled in thick marker across the whiteboard, "Welcome back, whistleblower." Next to her keyboard sat a folded note on crumpled paper. She hesitated before opening it. "Hope your conscience can build rockets. Good luck with that." No signature, just ink and malice. She stuffed it into her coat pocket, jaw tight. Moments later, a tall woman with sharp cheekbones and a flawless braid approached, holding a tablet. Her name tag read Aisha Connors. Regina remembered her vaguely, brilliant in fluid dynamics, fiercely ambitious. "You're Kudrow?" Aisha asked without a smile. Regina nodded. "I am." "Just so we're clear, I've picked up your slack for the past 6 months. Don't expect a parade because Musk handed you a shiny title." Regina inhaled calmly. "I don't expect anything. I'm here to work." Aisha arched an eyebrow and walked away without another word. Later that evening, long after the others had left, Regina remained at her desk. Her screen glowed with equations and schematics, diagrams of modular cooling grids she had sketched during her time away. She barely noticed the hum of the servers or the distant clangs from the testing bays. A ping broke her focus. A message from Elon. "Hang in there. First days back are heavier than launch days. You don't need everyone's approval, just your own." She stared at the message for a long moment. No pleasantries, no empty praise, just a quiet push to keep going. She typed back a single word, "Copy." She stayed another hour, building the framework for a prototype she'd imagined months ago, an adaptive heat shield matrix with fewer points of failure and greater reusability. When she finally left, the parking lot was empty and the stars were starting to show. The next week was harder. Aisha rarely looked at her. Meetings were colder when Regina spoke. Comments like, "That's not how we've been doing it," or "We tried that, didn't work," cut into every suggestion. But Regina didn't argue. She documented, built, observed. Every morning she arrived earlier than everyone else, and every evening she was the last to leave. By Thursday, she had something physical to show. She wheeled in her prototype, a compact hexagonal plate covered in textured composite tiles, each responding differently to directed heat exposure. When she ran the thermal test, the screen showed a 23% efficiency gain over the current model. A few engineers clapped. Aisha remained silent, arms crossed. Regina didn't look at her. She simply noted the numbers and shut down the system. That night, she found a new sticky note on her desk. "Maybe you can build rockets after all." It was unsigned, but the handwriting was unmistakable. Aisha. The following day, Aisha approached as Regina calibrated the model. "You really stayed up all week making that." Regina didn't turn. "Yeah. Took some guesses based on the old Falcon thermal maps. Turns out guesses can be useful." Aisha studied the setup. "You've been off the grid for months, but you still had the latest schematics in your head?" "I never stopped thinking about them," Regina replied. "I just didn't have a lab. Only napkins and Joe's Lego sets." Aisha hesitated. "Joe, your son?" Regina nodded. "Leukemia. He's responding well, but it's been a fight." For the first time, Aisha's expression softened. She looked like she wanted to say more, but didn't. She just offered a small, respectful nod and walked away. It was enough. By the second week, small shifts began to happen. People asked Regina's opinion in briefings. A technician offered her coffee. One even asked her to sign off on a draft schematic. The mocking tone faded. The rooms grew warmer. Regina didn't bask in it. She kept working. But on Friday, as she left for the weekend, she found a note taped to her monitor. "Real engineers don't fold. They recalibrate." It wasn't signed, but for the first time, she smiled. The scan results came in on a rainy Tuesday morning. Regina opened the email on her phone with trembling fingers, standing in the corridor between Bay 3 and the break room. For a moment, the cold, white walls seemed to vanish. The world narrowed to the words. "Joe's latest tests show continued remission. Bone marrow function normalized. Next phase, reduced chemo." She exhaled deeply. Her vision blurred with sudden tears. Joe, her brave, brilliant boy, was holding on. Against all odds. Regina tapped her chest twice, his signal from the hospital days, and whispered, "We've got this, kid." But relief was short-lived. Later that day, a routine SpaceX internal bulletin dropped into everyone's inbox. It was standard corporate fare, project updates, HR announcements, photos from a team off-site. Regina skimmed it absent-mindedly until her name caught her eye in a headline. "Rehiring under review. Ethics and exceptions." Her stomach dropped. She clicked. The article didn't mention her directly by name, but the language left no doubt. It spoke of former employees returning under questionable circumstances, of prior ethical concerns, and the risk of alienating loyal teams. The tone was veiled but damning. It was signed anonymously, likely written or planted by someone from legal or PR. Or worse, Creed Bratton. 2 hours later, the dagger arrived. An email sent to multiple internal departments. This time, from Creed himself, addressed with calculated vagueness but unmistakable intent. It's deeply disappointing when those who once jeopardized our integrity are not only allowed back, but celebrated. When facts are rewritten and accountability is erased, we must ask, what message does that send to those who've remained loyal? The CC list included Elon, HR, and all department leads. Regina stared at her screen, her hands curled into fists. Around her, the air shifted. Whispers resumed. A few chairs rolled away. One man across the aisle avoided eye contact entirely. She deleted the email. Then she opened a report she'd been working on. Her fingers hovered above the keyboard, frozen. Don't you dare stop. Regina turned. Lin Chun stood there, holding a mug of tea in one hand and a wrench in the other. Short, wiry, and always wearing oversized glasses, Lin had a presence that seemed to ground the room. Her dark eyes were sharp with fire today. He's trying to drag you back into the mud, Lin said, setting the tea down on Regina's desk. Let him roll in it alone. Regina swallowed. They're listening to him. You saw that email? Yeah, I did. And I also saw your Shield model cut drag by 11%. I saw you here at 9 p.m. 3 nights in a row. And I saw Aisha quoting you in today's team stand-up. That's what I saw. Regina blinked. You think it's enough? Lin shrugged. It has to be. Or the whole place is built on the wrong kind of fuel. Regina let out a small laugh, part gratitude, part disbelief. I saved you ginger tea, Lin added, then walked off before Regina could say thank you. That evening, as the sky dimmed and most of the engineers trickled out, Regina stayed, reviewing simulation data. Her shoulders were tight. Her brain refused to let go of Creed's words. A knock startled her. She turned. Elon Musk stood at the entrance of her bay, hands in his pockets. He wasn't flanked by assistants or carrying a laptop. Just standing there, like an ordinary visitor. I read the bulletin, he said quietly. She nodded but didn't speak. I also read the email, he added, stepping into the light. If it helps, I told Creed he has until Friday to clear his desk. Regina's eyebrows lifted. You're firing him. I'm offering him a quiet exit. He won't take it. Men like him rarely do. She looked down at her tablet, the blueprints glowing faintly. They're listening to him. Some are, but the ones who matter are watching you. She looked up. I know it's hard to believe, Elon continued, but sometimes people need to see more than one truth to change their mind. Creed's truth is loud. Yours is slow, but it's stronger, because it's real. There was a pause. Joe's scans were good, she said suddenly. Elon smiled. I heard. That's the only news today that actually matters. Regina blinked. For a brief moment, her shoulders relaxed. I'm presenting the thermal loop design at the board meeting next week, she said quietly. Elon tilted his head. Good. They need to see you in motion. You'll be there. I'm not supposed to be. Regina raised an eyebrow. But I'll be there, he added with a grin. For the first time in days, she smiled. Thank you, she said. Don't thank me. Just finish what you started. He turned to leave, then paused. Oh, and Regina. Yes. If you ever want to replace the SpaceX bulletin with something better, I have some notes. She laughed, the sound echoing off the concrete. The air inside the SpaceX boardroom was sterile and humming with quiet tension. Walls of frosted glass held back the clatter of work from the rest of the building, enclosing this sanctum in a bubble of prestige. 11 members of the board, dressed in sharp suits and polished discretion, sat around the long, dark table. Nameplates gleamed. Notebooks were closed. Eyebrows were raised. Regina stood near the head of the room, fingers grazing the edge of her tablet. Behind her, a massive screen displayed the opening frame of her presentation, thermal rebalancing in reusable shielding architecture. It sounded dry even to her, but she had poured her soul into it. They weren't making eye contact yet. A few board members scrolled through phones. One adjusted his Mont-Blanc pen repeatedly. Elon wasn't present physically, as promised. He'd opted to attend via video. His square was visible in the upper right corner of the screen, arms folded, silent. Watching, Regina cleared her throat. "Good afternoon. What I'm about to show you isn't just a design. It's a recovery." The phrase landed with a pause. A few heads turned. She tapped her tablet. The display behind her animated a detailed schematic of the Falcon Shield's thermal barrier system in flight. Numbers flickered. The arc of simulated descent shifted. Heat gradients flowed more efficiently than ever. Regina walked them through each data point, not as a defense, but as a narrative. She didn't apologize for being there. She didn't over-explain. She spoke like someone who had lived inside the problem. Someone who didn't just design solutions, she understood why they mattered. As the simulation concluded, the room changed. One of the board members, a silver-haired man with a reputation for skepticism, Arthur Langdon, tilted his head. "You cut failure probability by 14% with a 9% cost decrease." "Yes," Regina replied calmly, "by redistributing the ceramic composite layer in a spiral hex grid. It's less wasteful. And the grid, it mirrors a natural honeycomb, which is thermodynamically favorable." Langdon leaned back, hand covering his mouth. A long silence followed. Then he smiled. "What's your background again?" he asked. "I have a doctorate in aerospace thermodynamics from Georgia Tech," Regina said. "But I was recently managing inventory at a Burger King." Chuckles rippled around the room. Real chuckles. A younger member leaned forward, intrigued now. "How does one go from deep space to drive-thru?" Regina hesitated. "Ethics and leukemia, in that order." The boardroom fell silent. Langdon cleared his throat. "Well, I appreciate an engineer who's had their ego burned off." More laughter, this time warmer. "She's the real thing," said a voice from the screen. "Elon." Eyes shifted to the digital corner. Elon continued. "What you just saw didn't exist 6 months ago. Regina invented it under pressure, without support, without a title. This is what happens when you give people second chances." He paused. "And when you listen to what the system tries to discard." Langdon glanced around the room, then nodded. "Well, I say we fund the pilot. She gets her own team, and a direct line to Randy." A round of murmured approvals followed. Someone clapped. Another murmured, "About time." Regina's shoulders relaxed. She nodded, stepped away from the screen, and exhaled slowly as the board moved on to other agenda items. The decision had been made, not by a dramatic vote, but by something far more powerful: earned trust. That night, Regina was home with Joe, helping him arrange glow-in-the-dark solar system stickers on his ceiling when her phone buzzed. Lin Chen's name popped up. "Have you seen it?" "Seen what?" Regina asked. "Check the times." Regina opened her browser. Her stomach fluttered. There it was. The New York Times, from rocket science to fast food and back. One woman's SpaceX redemption. Her mouth parted slightly. The article featured a photo of her from that morning, mid-presentation. It outlined her background, her firing, her son's diagnosis, and her comeback. It even referenced Creed Bratton without naming him directly. It was fair, unflinching, and inspiring. The piece had already amassed thousands of shares. She stared at the screen, overwhelmed. She hadn't told anyone about this. And then, as if on cue, a text came in. From Elon. "Visibility is its own kind of protection. Just wanted you to be ready." Regina read the message twice. He had arranged the article. She leaned back on Joe's bed as he stuck Neptune above his head. "Mama, is that the real sky?" She looked up. "It will be. Someday." The fluorescent lights of St. Margaret's Children's Hospital buzzed faintly above, casting a sterile glow on the linoleum floors. Room 417 had become more than a recovery space. It was now a battlefield and a command center. Regina Kudrow stood beside her son Joe's hospital bed, staring at the heart monitor's rhythmic blips as if drawing courage from their consistency. Her left hand rested on Joe's small arm, while her right tapped furiously on the keyboard of her battered laptop perched on a rolling tray. Earlier that morning, Elon Musk had walked with his signature urgency into SpaceX's strategy room, blueprints in hand and eyes sharp with conviction. His words to the senior engineers echoed in Regina's mind. 6 weeks. That's all we have. If anyone can lead this, it's Regina. 6 weeks to design a viable model for the next generation rocket propulsion system, one that could revolutionize fuel efficiency, heat dispersion, and thrust stability. 6 weeks to dream beyond corporate noise and bureaucratic scars. And 6 weeks during which Joe, her 7-year-old son, would undergo the most aggressive stage of leukemia treatment. Regina didn't flinch when Elon posed the challenge. She looked him dead in the eye and simply asked, "Can I work from Joe's room?" "Of course," Elon had said. "We'll send whatever you need." Within hours, SpaceX engineers were coordinating deliveries. A foldable whiteboard appeared, markers in every color. High-speed Wi-Fi was installed discreetly. Regina's old laptop was upgraded with one of the new Neural Assist coding interfaces. Aisha personally delivered a compact printer, boxes of drafting paper, and a 3D modeling kit for simulation runs. "You'll probably need these," she said with a soft smile. Joe, still pale but forever curious, watched as his mother transformed the hospital room. His 4-stand shared space with a miniature whiteboard covered in combustion formulas. Tubes of medicine coexisted with CAD software, rendering experimental nozzle configurations. To Joe, it was magical. "Are we building a spaceship in here?" he whispered one night. "Kind of," Regina whispered back, brushing his hair from his damp forehead. "We're trying to build a better way to get there." The days became strangely rhythmic. Mornings began with Joe's medication and a quick sync-up call with the SpaceX design pod. Regina's voice remained composed, precise, yet brimming with passion as she presented updates and listened to feedback. When Joe napped, she scribbled equations and structural refinements with mechanical precision. Nurses and doctors respectfully moved around her, giving space to the mother engineer at war on 2 fronts. One evening, as the sun dipped below the hospital skyline, Aisha returned. She brought a small gift, a wooden puzzle shaped like a rocket. Joe lit up. "Can we build it together?" Aisha sat on the edge of the bed and nodded. As the two quietly constructed the toy, Regina watched them, her hands momentarily still. Something shifted in that room, not just trust, but solidarity. "I've been thinking," Aisha said while clicking the final piece into place. "Maybe your hybrid heat diffusion idea could be embedded within a lattice structure with variable thickness controlled by pressure sensors." Regina blinked. "That's genius. It could redistribute the heat passively and reduce stress on the inner wall." They leaned over the drafting table together, ideas blooming like a time-lapse of wildflowers. Joe watched them work, his smile subtle but real. Though tired, he found a new game, stacking his building blocks into elaborate towers beside their workspace. One particular night, as Regina fought off exhaustion, she glanced over at Joe's creation. He had used alternating heights built in a spiral. "Staggered placement to prevent collapse under uneven load," she murmured. Inspiration struck. She gently woke Aisha, who had dozed in the chair. "We need to change the structural base. Look at what Joe built. It's distributing tension laterally." Within hours, they had sketched a new modular assembly for the rocket's lower support frame. The spiral-inspired design reduced material fatigue by 18% in the simulations. Regina sent Elon a voice message at 3:15 a.m., her voice tired but thrilled. Initial results show promise. Joe just helped solve a load-bearing conundrum. The next morning, Elon replied with a single sentence, "Sometimes brilliance comes from the most unexpected minds." SpaceX accelerated fabrication of the new prototype. Engineers arrived in person with test materials for Regina to examine. She ran tests right there in the hospital, occasionally interrupted by a nurse adjusting Joe's meds. Her workstation looked both chaotic and beautiful. White boards packed with formulas, post-its with childlike doodles and thermal coefficients scribbled on the edges. Joe insisted they name the new rocket configuration. "Can we call it the Spiral Dragon?" "Deal," Regina smiled. The end of week 3 brought small victories. Joe's immune levels improved. The prototype passed a critical vacuum test. Elon scheduled a private session to review the results in detail and discuss rollout planning. But more than that, something was happening across SpaceX. Engineers in Hawthorne started adding photos of their families to lab walls. New flex hour policies were being tested. Regina's model of human-centered innovation was radiating outward. One quiet night, Regina stared at Joe, sleeping peacefully, clutching the wooden rocket puzzle like a teddy bear. Aisha, still at her side, murmured, "You know, we're not just building a ship. We're changing the launch pad." Regina closed her laptop and nodded, tears welling up. "And I'm finally not building it alone." The fluorescent lights above Joe's hospital bed buzzed softly, a quiet hum that had become part of Regina's daily rhythm. Between 4 beeps and nurses' footsteps, a new kind of symphony played out in room 312, a fusion of motherhood, science, and resilience. On the tray table beside Joe's bed, a small forest of multicolored plastic blocks stood arranged in an intricate tower, unlike anything from the instruction manual. Joe, pale but focused, had built it during the night while his mother was sketching trajectories in her notebook. "You made this?" Regina asked that morning, gazing at the strange symmetry of the structure. Joe nodded. "It's like the rocket you showed me, but standing on its tail. I wanted it to balance, like the landings you told me about." Aisha, who had arrived moments earlier with a box of takeout and a laptop, raised an eyebrow. "That's actually brilliant," she murmured, crouching to eye the angles. Regina blinked. The configuration was chaotic at first glance, but then, like a hidden melody in a complex score, clarity emerged. Joe's structure accounted for weight distribution in a way she hadn't considered. By noon, the hospital room had transformed into an engineering den. Aisha cleared a space on the windowsill for her laptop while Regina used tape to fix her latest sketches to the walls. Joe sat cross-legged on his bed, eyes bright despite the drip in his arm, offering occasional commentary that ranged from innocent questions to uncanny insights. "What if it rotated during descent?" he asked, pointing to a diagram. "Rotated," Regina repeated. "We usually avoid that due to fuel inefficiency, but wait." She traced a path across her sketchpad. A controlled rotation during descent could offset lateral drift and reduce the burden on the thrusters. It would mean faster landings, less wear on landing gear, and, if the calculations held, significant fuel conservation. By the end of the second day, they had a working draft of what they began calling the Helix re-entry configuration. Aisha uploaded the prototype design into SpaceX's simulation environment, running preliminary models remotely. The results were staggering. 23% efficiency gain in fuel expenditure, Aisha whispered in disbelief, scrolling through the readout. "That's not just good. That's industry shifting." Regina leaned back in her chair, overwhelmed by a strange combination of awe and gratitude. Joe looked at her, grinning shyly. "Did I help?" She hugged him tightly. "You did more than help, buddy. You changed the game." Word spread quickly through the engineering division, even though the core work was still technically under wraps. Aisha began fielding messages from intrigued colleagues. When Regina wasn't reviewing schematics, she was consulting with doctors or watching cartoons with Joe. Their lives were stitched together by the cadence of 4 drips and thrust equations. A few days later, Elon Musk made an unannounced visit to the hospital. He walked into the room mid-simulation, watching as Joe narrated his tower logic with Lego bricks and Regina explained the math that followed. This is extraordinary," Elon murmured, eyes fixed on the screen showing the burn curve improvements. "And you're doing all of this from a hospital room." Regina glanced at Joe. He's the co-architect. Joe blushed, then pointed to one of the diagrams taped to the wall. That one's mine. Elon nodded thoughtfully. Maybe we should start hiring from the pediatric ward. He sat down beside Joe and began asking him about his favorite space missions. Within minutes, they were deep in conversation about Falcon Heavy, comparing it to mythical dragons and volcanoes. Regina watched them, heart full. That night, after Elon left, Regina scribbled a new variation of the Helix module based on Joe's metaphor about the rocket curling like a dragon's tail before landing. Aisha, now a nightly visitor with extra chargers and protein bars, reviewed it. "I think he's on to something again," she said. The team sent an internal presentation to SpaceX's R&D department. Unlike past cold receptions, this one was met with enthusiastic replies. Engineers who had once doubted Regina now asked thoughtful questions and offered to help run extended simulations. By week's end, the design had advanced to the prototyping phase. Parts were being 3D printed at SpaceX's HQ, while Regina and Aisha continued refining the details from a hospital. Joe remained their muse and sounding board. During a routine blood test, Joe asked his mom, "When your rocket flies, will it have my name on it?" Regina smiled through tired eyes. "More than that, it'll carry your ideas." The 8th day marked the final validation test. The prototype, launched in a closed-loop simulation, performed with 23.4% greater efficiency. Fail-safes activated perfectly. Recovery time was reduced by 17%. Engineers at HQ broke into spontaneous applause. Someone sent a voice memo. "Tell Joe he's officially a SpaceX consultant now." Regina read it to him as he sipped apple juice from a bendy straw. He laughed and asked if he could get paid in gummy bears. Aisha grinned. "I'll make it happen." That night, the three of them sat by the window, watching stars appear through the city haze. No fancy lups. No boards. Just a mother, a friend, and a child recovering from cancer, building rockets with crayons, hope, and sheer determination. The conference room at SpaceX pulsed with the quiet tension of anticipation. Executives shuffled papers, engineers whispered among themselves, and board members stared at their tablets or the clock on the wall, signaling skepticism or simple impatience. The long, brushed steel table glinted under the clean overhead lights. Floor-to-ceiling windows cast fading daylight into the room, slowly giving way to the amber hues of early evening. At the front stood Regina Kudrow, her shoulders squared despite the invisible weight she carried. A large digital screen behind her displayed a title slide, Next-Gen Propulsion System, Organic Flow Modeling. Below it, a colorful diagram that appeared deceptively simple, a structure of children's blocks, sat beside a complex thermodynamic model. Regina's laptop glowed with lines of code and dynamic charts. She took a deep breath, then glanced sideways. Aisha, seated halfway down the table, offered a small, encouraging nod. At the back of the room, Elon Musk had arrived quietly and stood with his arms crossed, his gaze sharp and unreadable. Regina began, her voice steady and composed. "Good afternoon. What I'm about to show you is the result of an unconventional design process. Over the past 6 weeks, our team has developed a prototype combustion chamber that shows a 23.4% increase in efficiency, utilizing a novel nozzle configuration based on naturally occurring diffusion principles." She clicked to the next slide, footage of a test run, followed by side-by-side comparisons with previous models. The metrics were striking: less fuel waste, lower heat generation, and improved thrust-to-weight ratio. Whispers swept through the room. Some heads lifted, pens scribbled. "But the real genesis of this idea," she continued, "came not from software or lab simulations. It came from here." She advanced a slide to reveal a photo of a brightly colored block tower, symmetrical and oddly elegant. "My son Joe built this while I worked beside him in a hospital room. He's 7. He's fighting leukemia. And while I was sketching, lost in math, he built this." Regina stepped aside as the structure rotated on the screen, revealing layers and patterns. Something about the symmetry clicked. I realized the configuration mimicked the diffusion curves I'd been modeling. His intuitive arrangement became the basis for our nozzle redesign. The room went still. Then, a voice from the front, an older board member with silver hair and a slight rasp. "You're saying a child's toy inspired this?" Regina didn't flinch. "I'm saying perspective can come from the most unexpected places. Innovation isn't confined to whiteboards and labs. Sometimes it's born in hospital rooms between chemo rounds and whispered bedtime stories." The silence that followed felt reverent. Aisha leaned forward. "I watched the prototype evolve. It's the real thing." Regina turned grief into brilliance. Another engineer murmured agreement. Elon stepped forward, his presence commanding attention. I asked Regina to lead this challenge because she sees in ways most don't. Not just engineering solutions, but human ones. She didn't just build a better system. She built it while balancing the most difficult circumstances imaginable. He turned to face the board. "I propose we formally create a new innovation division under Regina's leadership, focused on intuitive design and human-informed models. We need more of this kind of thinking." A younger board member raised an eyebrow. "It's a radical shift." "And the right one," Elon replied. A senior woman on the board, with short gray hair and a pearl necklace, stood. "I second the proposal. We need to evolve not just our technologies, but our culture." Regina has reminded us of both. The vote passed unanimously. After the meeting, Elon approached Regina. "You didn't just impress them. You reminded them of what we're really here to do." Regina managed a weary smile. "I didn't expect this. I just wanted to solve the problem." "And you did," Elon said, "with heart. That's not easy to quantify, but it changes everything." That evening, back at the hospital, Joe was propped up in bed, surrounded by a growing city of blocks. One tower stood taller than the rest, ringed by smaller spirals. "Is that another rocket?" Regina asked, setting down her laptop and slipping off her shoes. "Nope," Joe grinned, brushing hair from his face. "It's a space castle. For you." She knelt beside him. "Then I'll be its queen." "You already are," he said matter-of-factly. A nurse entered, holding that day's edition of the New York Times. Folded under her arm was a copy with a striking photo on the front page. Regina, mid-presentation, the block structure behind her glowing on the screen. The headline read, "From Burger King to Breakthrough, How a Mother and Her Son Changed Rocket Science." Below it, a quote from Elon, "We can teach algorithms and equations. What we can't teach is heart. That's what makes all the difference." The article told the whole story: Regina's firing after refusing to falsify data, her fall into fast food shifts, the makeshift workstation beside Joe's hospital bed, and the child's tower that inspired all. It spoke of resilience, of the quiet power of love, and the rare alchemy that occurs when technical brilliance meets human depth. Regina read silently while Joe munched crackers. Her throat tightened, tears brimming. "Mom," Joe said, nudging her gently. "Why are you crying?" She wiped her eyes. "Because I'm proud. And because you got to see it." Joe smiled. "Does this mean I'm famous?" "I think we both are," she said, kissing his forehead. "Cool," he replied. "Can I be an astronaut now?" "One day," she whispered. "But first, we get to grow up together." In the quiet of that room, between 4 drips and blinking monitors, Regina didn't feel like a hero. She felt like a mother, a woman who had made one impossible decision after another and somehow turned survival into invention. And outside that window, somewhere far beyond the horizon, a rocket waited, one shaped by colored blocks, childhood dreams, and the power of being seen. The echo of Regina's triumph had barely settled when Creed Bratton resurfaced, this time with a calculated air of indignation. Dressed in a suit too polished for sincerity, he arrived at the next senior board meeting uninvited, armed with a file folder and a smile that didn't reach his eyes. "I think it's time we talk about accountability," he said, placing the folder on the long polished table like a lawyer presenting new evidence. Regina was there, seated 2 chairs from Elon, reviewing her notes for a follow-up proposal. Her heart skipped, but her face remained composed. Creed opened the folder and produced printed graphs, simulations, and an annotated version of Regina's nozzle design. This model, he began, gesturing to the display on the boardroom screen, introduces unstable oscillation patterns under low-thrust scenarios. It's elegant, yes, but flawed. Dangerous, even. The board should be aware. He turned, expecting support, perhaps nods of agreement. But what met him was a room of silent, scrutinizing faces. Regina stood slowly, like a seasoned trial lawyer. "May I respond?" Elon gave a subtle nod. "Go ahead." She walked calmly to the screen, removed Creed's file, and inserted a USB drive into the console. The screen flickered, then displayed log data, time-stamped tests, and a comparison overlay of her actual parameters versus the falsified ones in Creed's simulation. "This," she said, highlighting discrepancies, "is not my model. It's a distorted replication using outdated engine parameters and incorrect temperature baselines. Notice here," she circled a figure. Creed inserted his own damping coefficient untested and failed to use the adaptive feedback loop that prevents exactly the oscillations he claims to demonstrate. The board murmured. Someone let out a low whistle. "I thought we already addressed this," said the silver-haired board member who had spoken at her last presentation. "Didn't we clear her work with the latest simulation audits?" Regina nodded. "We did. What you're seeing now is a deliberate attempt to discredit valid work using manipulated data. This isn't just a professional disagreement, it's sabotage." Creed's smile finally cracked. "You're accusing me of fraud." Elon stood. "No," he said calmly, stepping forward. "She's not accusing. She's proving it." He picked up the USB and placed it on the table before Creed. "I had the legal team and our engineering integrity division review this yesterday. We anticipated you might try something like this. You used company servers to generate falsified data on a revoked account." A dead silence fell. Creed looked from face to face, searching for allies, finding none. "I was protecting the company from untested risks," he tried. Elon shook his head. "No, you were protecting your ego. You fired someone who stood up for integrity, hoping no one would notice. But she came back stronger, and now you're trying to rewrite history." He turned to the rest of the board. "Effective immediately, Creed Bratton is terminated. His access is revoked, and we'll begin proceedings with the Ethics Committee." Security, almost invisibly called in advance, entered the room. Creed stiffened but didn't resist. As he was escorted out, his eyes locked on Regina. For a moment, there was something like regret, but it passed, leaving only the brittle resentment of a man undone by his own arrogance. After the door closed behind him, no one spoke for a beat. Then Elon turned to Regina. "You held your ground with grace. That's not just engineering. That's leadership." A senior woman on the board added, "And that's why we trust you now, Regina. You earned more than respect today. You've set a new standard." The weight of months lifted in a breath Regina hadn't realized she was holding. She felt her hands relax, her shoulders drop. Later that evening, she walked down the corridors of SpaceX, this time not as someone hoping to prove herself, but as someone who had. Aisha caught up to her. "That was incredible. He tried, but you didn't even blink." "I blinked," Regina laughed. "Just didn't run." "I brought something for Joe," Aisha said, handing her a small Lego rocket set. "Tell him it's from his co-designer." "Thanks, Aisha. Really. Looks like you're finally where you were always meant to be." Regina smiled. "Feels like it." When she got to the hospital, Joe was sitting up, reading a space book with a flashlight, even though the lights were on. "Hey," she said, placing the Lego set in his lap. His eyes lit up. "Is it the one with boosters?" "Yup. Your friend Aisha picked it out." As he began tearing into the box, Regina glanced at the TV above his bed. News coverage showed a clip from the board meeting, Elon announcing Creed's dismissal. Then it cut to a new headline, "Engineer Vindicated After Months of Controversy, a SpaceX Story of Justice and Genius." Joe paused. "Are they talking about you again?" She nodded. "Yeah. but this time it's good. Cool. He smiled proud. And for the first time in many months, Regina didn't feel like she had to defend herself. She was no longer surviving. She was standing tall, recognized for who she truly was. The camera lights bathed the studio in soft brilliance. Elon Musk sat across from the interviewer, poised yet relaxed. The segment, airing live on national television, had already reached millions. But as Elon leaned forward, his voice took on a gravity that shifted the energy in the room. "There's a woman at SpaceX," he began, "who embodies everything we claim to value: courage, intellect, perseverance. Her name is Regina Kudrow. 6 months ago, she was working at a Burger King. Today, she leads one of the most advanced propulsion design teams in the world. And the path between those two moments should challenge every assumption we have about success." The interviewer, visibly moved, nodded. "Is it true her son helped inspire one of your new engines?" Elon smiled. "Yes. Innovation doesn't always wear a lab coat. Sometimes it builds block towers beside a hospital bed." The story of Regina's return, her breakthrough design, and the quiet genius of her young son had already made the rounds online. But now it had a platform as big as her victory deserved. The nation listened, and more importantly, companies listened. Calls flooded in from aerospace firms, universities, and startups wanting to learn more about SpaceX's new approach to talent development. The next day, the company officially announced the Second Chance Innovation Initiative. Spearheaded by Elon, the program was designed to identify and support professionals who had exited STEM careers due to systemic bias, economic hardship, or ethical conflicts. Regina's name was the first inscribed on the program's official charter. Internal culture at SpaceX began to shift. Teams across departments reviewed onboarding policies. HR overhauled feedback protocols. Engineers who had once viewed talent acquisition as transactional began talking about mentorship and redemption. Regina continued her work quietly. The prototype, which had already shown a 23% increase in combustion efficiency, now entered commercial optimization. Its compact form and modular design made it ideal for both satellite launches and deep space missions. Investors took note. Orders for the Falcon XR, informally nicknamed Joe's Rocket, within the company, skyrocketed. Sales climbed by 17% in the first quarter alone. In the background of all this change, Regina closed a chapter of her life. With the help of Elon's executive team, she secured a modest but beautiful house in a quiet neighborhood near the coast. White walls, blue shutters, and a small garden out front where Joe could play. The mortgage was manageable, the neighborhood peaceful. For the first time in over a year, Regina felt she could breathe. One weekend, she invited Aisha and Lynn over. They sat on the porch as Joe showed off his telescope, now perched permanently on the back deck. "That star there," he said, pointing, "I named it after Mom." Regina laughed. "You can't name stars without permission from the International Astronomical Union." Joe smirked. "Too late. I already did." Inside, hanging above the fireplace, was a framed certificate with the words, "Joseph Kudrow Future Scholar Fund." The fund, seated with Regina's first full bonus under her new title, was modest now, but growing. "Every kid should get to study without worrying," Regina had told Elon during one of their last meetings. Joe won't be the only one. Meanwhile, media outlets continued to follow the story. The New York Times ran a follow-up article, "The New Frontier of Inclusion: How a Mother's Fight Changed Aerospace Forever." Time magazine placed Regina on the cover of their summer edition with the headline, "Grace Under Pressure." Still, Regina avoided the spotlight whenever possible. She declined invitations for speaking engagements, preferring to speak through her work. Her designs were now being adapted for applications in sustainable energy and high-efficiency transportation. She was leading not with noise, but with precision. At SpaceX headquarters, a wall near the main atrium now displayed a rotating panel of innovators whose breakthroughs had changed the company's trajectory. Among them, Regina Kudrow. Under her name, a quote, "Sometimes the path to discovery runs through fire. But if you keep walking, you come out stronger and clearer on the other side." One afternoon, Joe visited headquarters with his mom. As they passed the wall, he looked up and tugged her hand. "You're on the wall." Regina looked at the display, then at her son. "So are you in a way." He pointed at the quote. "That's what you told me when I was sick. I meant it for both of us." They walked further down the hallway, past the glass offices and echoing marble. The future no longer looked like something Regina was clawing toward. It was something she was now shaping in real time, with every decision, every sketch, every quiet act of resilience. The program she inspired had already brought in 3 new hires. One was a woman in her late 50s returning to aerospace after caring for a parent with dementia. Another was a former Navy technician who had left the industry after PTSD treatment. The third, a trans engineer from a rural community, was already contributing to avionics design. Their presence was a direct legacy of Regina's courage. That night, as Joe slept peacefully under star-printed sheets, Regina stood in the kitchen with a cup of tea, watching the fog roll in from the coast. Her phone vibrated with a new message. It was from Elon. "NASA just requested a demo of the XR series. They asked for you to present. Also, they asked if you'd be willing to mentor 2 engineers from their inclusion initiative. No pressure, just proud of you." Regina stared at the message, then smiled. No more apologies, no more doubts, only forward. The sun had barely risen over Hawthorne, casting a soft amber hue through the high windows of the SpaceX Innovation Hub. The building, once sterile and unfeeling, now pulsed with life. Engineers moved through the open floor with a quiet energy, pausing occasionally to look toward the glass-walled central lounge. There, a boy sat cross-legged on the floor, surrounded by building blocks, wires, and tiny magnetic rocket models. "Joe." Regina stood to one side of the lounge, a cup of coffee cradled in her hands. She watched her son animate the blocks like characters in a play. His voice, excited but soft, filled the room in bursts. Across from her, Elon Musk leaned on the steel railing that overlooked the lounge, silent for a long moment. "I owe you an explanation," he finally said, eyes fixed on Joe. Regina turned toward him, brow lifted slightly. "About?" He took a slow breath. "That day at Burger King, I didn't go there by accident. I knew." Regina's hand tightened around the coffee cup. Her voice, quiet, asked, "You knew I was working there?" "I did," he said. "A week before that, I got an anonymous tip about a former SpaceX engineer flipping burgers, a woman with a spotless record who'd been fired without official documentation. I read your file. I remembered your reports, especially that heat dispersion model you created for the Merlin upgrade. Brilliant stuff." She felt her chest tighten. "Why didn't you reach out sooner?" "I didn't want to interfere until I knew the truth," he replied. "So I drove there. I needed to see it for myself. The way you held your ground at that drive-thru window, your poise, even when you were tired and cornered, that told me everything I needed." Regina looked down at Joe, who was now explaining something to a group of young SpaceX engineers who had joined him on the floor. Their laughter and encouragement echoed softly. "You gave me a second chance," she said, voice cracking with emotion. "No," Elon said, shaking his head. "You gave it to yourself. I just opened the door." There was silence again, but it was comfortable, like the kind that forms between people who've come through something together. Elon continued, "You know, when I was younger, I thought leadership meant having all the answers. But it's really about knowing who to listen to. I've learned more from watching you over these past months than from 1,000 consultants." She let out a soft, stunned laugh. "That may be the most Elon Musk thing I've ever heard." He smiled, then grew serious. "I named the new wing after you, the Kudrow Innovation Lab. It's more than just a tribute, it's a declaration of what this place stands for now. Creativity, resilience, integrity." Regina felt her knees buckle slightly, overwhelmed, but she steadied herself. "Thank you," she whispered. At that moment, Joe stood and pointed at one of the engineers. "If you flip that piece upside down, it balances better. See?" The man tried it. The structure held. "I told you," Joe said, grinning. One of the interns muttered, "Kid's a genius." Runs in the family, another added. Regina's heart swelled with a pride that almost hurt. She crouched down beside Joe and cupped his cheek. "You okay, sweetheart?" He nodded. "Better than okay. They said I could help build a mini prototype later." Elon crouched beside them. "You're already helping, Joe. Big time." The three of them sat there for a while, watching the small rocket tower grow taller under Joe's guidance. No speeches, no camera cruz, just connection, quiet and real. As they left the lounge later that day, Regina paused at the exit. She turned to Elon. "You know," she said, "I used to think my career ended the day I got fired. But it didn't. That was just a pivot point. I see that now." He nodded. "It wasn't the end. It was the beginning of the real story. Funny how life works," she said, then added, "I hope we remember that for the next person who needs a door opened." "We will," Elon said, meaning it. And with that, they stepped out into the sunlight. Regina took Joe's hand as he skipped ahead, talking about orbits and space castles, unaware of how far he and his mother had already traveled. Sometimes the greatest revolutions begin not in launch pads or boardrooms, but in whispered truths at fast food windows. In the quiet courage of saying no when it would be easier to say yes. In the tenacity of a single mother who refuses to let her brilliance fade into the shadows. And in the simple, powerful idea that everyone, no matter where they are, deserves the chance to be seen, heard, and honored for who they truly are. Now it's your turn. Did this story stir something in you? Leave a memory in the comments, maybe of someone who believed in you, or a time you stood back up when life knocked you down. I read every single one with care and gratitude.